What started on the drawing board became a trophy. Engineers at Federal Premium Ammunition designed the trophy-bonded tip bullet to deliver devastating, bone-crushing performance. With a translucent polymer tip and boat-tail design, Trophy Tip provides flatter trajectories and improved accuracy. Plus, a solid copper shank jacket and bonded core mean high weight retention and deep penetration. Trophy Bonded Tip from Federal Premium Ammunition. Claim your trophy.
Live from the Deer and Deer Hunting headquarters, welcome again to Deer Talk Now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dan Schmidt along with Brad Rux. Another great week in store for us here. Deer Talk, we're getting closer to August. We're going to give you a little bit of a curveball today. Brad, what we're going to do is we're not going to chit-chat too much today. What we're going to do is we're going to take all the questions that you guys have been throwing at us, and they've been many. Check out our Facebook page, the Deer and Deer Hunting Facebook page. Brad, we had 150 questions that were logged just within the past couple of hours. Everybody is really jumping on the Deer Talk bandwagon. We love it. And as you know, you can always watch every show right here at deeranddeerhunting.com for free. All the archive shows are right there at your disposal. Check them all out. We try to throw as much information at you as possible. And again, if we read your question on the air today or any day, you're going to get a free whitetail rut calendar from Deer and Deer Hunting. It's the one we've been doing forever. It's got Charlie Alsheimer's exclusive rut predictions in there. The only catch here is if we read your name, I don't have time to track everybody down who we did, so send me an email. Send me an email. We'll get that rut calendar off to you. My email is right there. It's dan.schmidt@fwmedia.com. Send me an email just for that, please, because I get a lot of them every day, and we'll get you out your rut calendar. Brad, here we go. We're not even going to talk about the weather today. How do you like that?
Perfect.
All right, cool. Here you go, Brad. Brittany Smith, you're up. This is your question, Brittany. These all came from Facebook. I took them all from Facebook today, although you can ask the questions. I'm going to pause here. Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, email, however you get us the questions, we will consider them for the show. Brittany Smith, Facebook. I'm taking my 7-year-old son hunting for the first time, Brad. It's going to be a youth hunt that's coming up in Tennessee. She wants some insight and information on what type of gun would be best to start him out.
My personal favorite, small caliber, you don't want to kick a lot. A .243 will put animals down immediately, especially if you use good ammo. You know, I use the Fusion ammo by Federal. I've been using it way before they sponsored this, since my daughter, who's now 19 and was 12, we've been using it, and I was impressed. You know, we use a single shot as well. And I got a little .223 barrel for that, so I had them practice all summer with a .223, had the other .243 barrel, put it on right before the season. I shot it again. I didn't even let them know. I just sent them out there during the firearm season. They shot it and they couldn't tell the difference. It's a great caliber for harvesting whitetails.
What about sighting that gun in?
You know, the biggest thing is I already sighted it in, and then we shot it all summer long. So I wanted to set it in because I wanted to make sure it was dead, you know, dead on, and then that way I didn't have to worry about if the child was off a little bit. You know, I knew it was them. And the biggest thing is making them comfortable with that firearm. So we shot all the time. We even had a tree stand. We put up a double man ladder stand, had them shoot out of the tree stand. We use a cardboard deer, and literally I was trying to get my daughter when she was 12. Here, he's gonna move. You gotta shoot him quick, quick, quick. And she's like, Dad, you're making me nervous. That's the idea. That's what it's going to feel like when you're hunting. So try to recreate those situations. If you're going to hunt out of the ground blind, shoot out of the ground blind, all that's going to make them more successful.
Awesome information. Brittany, good luck. And we want to see pictures of you and your son with that deer that you get this fall. Awesome question. Thank you. I'm going to take the next question, Brad. This comes from Kenny Jones. Kenny wants to know, he says, if I harvest a doe with 1 fawn or 2 fawns, what's the percentage that those fawns will survive after that doe is harvested? Kenny, that's a really good question. We get it a lot. And the short answer to your question is going to be those fawns are pretty much going to survive. I'm not going to say 100% because no fawns are going to survive 100%. But if a fawn made it to hunting season, its chances of survival are great. The one thing that we do know from scientific research, and this has been years and years of research that's been done across the country, is that fawns are usually full-blown ruminants, meaning that they can eat native forage and grasses and browse and all that kind of stuff at about 8 weeks old. So 8 weeks, 2 months. All right, so you're looking at a fawn that's 2 months old is, in a lot of places, you're looking at May, June, July, they're already functioning ruminants. And that's why a lot of these bow hunting seasons are set up the way they're set up, in the fact that they open in later September. These fawns are, you'll still see them weaning, don't get me wrong. A lot of places you'll see fawns weaning, I mean, all the way up to gun season in some places in November. Even in some southern places, you'll see it even farther than that. But if that fawn reaches that, that part of the year, and you have good habitat, that's always a qualifier. If you have good habitat that's got good, like I said, native grasses, good browse, and even farm crops, egg, food plots, whatever, supplemental feeding, those fawns are well prepared to survive on their own. And that's, like I said, why we have those seasons that we do. So don't worry about it. I've never worried about it. And you will see orphan fawns. And an interesting thing, and I'll try to cut this short, is that a lot of times orphan buck fawns will tend to disperse shorter distances. So you'll keep those bucks around a little bit longer on your property if they are orphaned at a young age like that. So that's kind of actually a benefit to doing your doe harvest early and often, especially in areas that need that doe harvest and that intensive kind of pressure. But thank you, Kenny. Great question. One we get a lot, and it's really relevant. Brad, let's take next question for you. Right down the list here. This is coming from Charlie Graves. Brad, new hunter here in Charlie Graves. He hunts both ground blind. He has hunted both ground blinds and climbing stands last year. And what he wants to know are, what are the different situations when a blind would be best, and what are the other situations when a climbing tree stand would be best?
It's really up to the individual hunter, but if I'm going to go into a climber, it's probably going to be one of those areas that's further back in where I'm going to hunt there or try this spot before I know it's a good area. Because if you're going to carry a blind, it's a little bit more set up, you're going to make a little bit more noise, you're going to leave more scent. If it's over a food source or something like that, I think you can hunt out of either one of them, whatever you're more comfortable with. So there's really not a bad time. Ground blinds, if you're moving them into a location, you literally have to brush it in. You have to hide that thing very, very, make sure you do detail oriented, or the deer are going to see it and spook away from it. Now, if it's before the season and you're going to hunt over, a known area that's very, very good, just put that ground blind out. They're going to get used to it, and I don't care what people say, like, a mature buck will never walk past it. No, that's a lie. I mean, they're going to walk past it. They're so used to it. Look at the big tower blinds that people hunt out of. They've been there for years, and people are still harvesting, great deer out of those locations. So I don't think you can go bad. If it's, like I said, if you're going in there for a rush hunt, I would definitely use a climber. If you're going to be in a more secure area, use either one. The big disadvantage to the ground blind, there's only one in my opinion, it is you cannot see as far. So you don't see the deer that are on the fringe. All the deer that you see are relatively close, which is nice, but you're going to miss some of those observations of a deer that's further away, just because you're at ground level and you just don't have that point of view. Great insights there, Brad, and I know you've done that a lot. Let's go to the next. Thank you, Charlie. Great question. Next person up, Russell Wagner. Russell, thank you for your question. Okay, this is a slam dunk for me. Russell wants to know, okay, he said, so you've been fortunate enough to harvest a deer. What would my favorite tool be for getting that deer out of the woods? And he says an ATV is not an option. So I'm assuming, Russell, you're hunting either public land or way back in the woods somewhere. And he says, other than a rope, obviously, what's the best way? A couple things that I've used sleds, just like the toboggan plastic type sleds that you can get at about any department store, farm store, whatnot. I've used those. They work well. They work even well on dry ground. One product in particular is called the Game Gurney. We actually have this one in chopped deer. That one is kind of cool in the fact that it is it rolls out, and it's almost like a tarp. It's a plasticky kind of tarp with all sorts of really cool buckles designed into it. And basically the idea there is you roll this, I'm going to call it this tarp, the Game Gurney. You roll it out and you put your deer on top of it. You roll it back together and you snap those buckles, and it basically is like almost like a blanket for the deer. But that thing is, I don't know what it's made out of. Slippery.
It's slippery. And you can I've dragged many a deer across a particular property that I hunt that's a 40-acre drag out of there with that. And what's nice about it is it has handles that you can just kind of hold behind you and drag it on out. But that's what I use, Russell. Like I said, there's other things out there that you can do more, conveniently, or I should say you should be able to find them more conveniently. But check out what we have there at Shop Deere, and you'll find some other options. Speaking of Shop Deere, we're going to insert quickly today's product of the week, or the product of the week, I should say, and that is another new product from Viking Solutions. You've got to check these guys out. We talked about them before. It's the Waller gang from Alabama, and they've come up with some really great products just for field care and getting your deer out of the woods and that type of thing. The new one that they have that we're featuring this week is called the Elevator. What's really cool about this, I just wrote a few notes about it. I have not personally tried it. I've seen the videos you're going to be watching here. But what's neat about this thing is it weighs 20 pounds. It folds flat. And this basically is a product. How many times have you tried to get a deer in the back of the truck and you just can't get it up on the end gate? This thing basically folds flat. I've used extension ladder pieces and things like that to do it. This has got a little winch built right into it, a hand crank, and it will lift 300 pounds. So as you can see here in the video, basically you just roll your deer on top of this thing, you lift it up, and you can put it in your back of your pickup truck, you can put it back in your UTV, you can get it on the back of your ATV. Really great product. It doesn't cost a lot. We got them on sale at Shop Deere. And every product at Shop Deere, if you're watching Deer Talk and you buy something from us, you put Deer Talk, one word, lowercase, in the checkout box, you're going to get 10% off your order. So that's a really great benefit. So that's our product of the week. Brad, I need to take a drink of water here quick. This is different for me. Next question, Chris Eman. Chris asks, I'm giving you this one, Brad. I was going to take it. When mature bucks stay in the same area from year to year, which has happened to him the last couple of years, he's got a couple 4-year-olds that are always there. There's always plenty of does in the area, he says, but the bucks seem to disappear during the rut. Why would they disappear during the rut?
Well, the 3- and 4-year-olds, I think Charlie Alzheimer said it best. They walk until they drop. Basically, they're out there searching for does. And even though you have a lot of does on your property, they're going to continue to mingle until they find a doe that's in heat. The other thing is, a lot of times where these deer are coming out to a food source, there's deer from all different locations that are coming into that food source. So even though the buck's living on yours, he's using a food source that maybe deer out of your property are coming from. They can easily just follow that doe, back to that other property, and that's why they roam so much. You can give them everything you want. I mean, you can give them security, water, food, It doesn't matter. Those 3- and 4-year-olds are likely to roam. I lost one last year. It was a great deer, 3-year-old. We had him in the core of our property. We let him go thinking he was going to be a giant this year, and he got shot during gun season just over the border.
They walk till they die.
They walk till they drop, yep.
Good question, Chris, and that is a good one to know, and basically you just got to do the best you can with what you got. Next question we have comes from Jeffrey Trainer. Jeffrey, thank you for writing us here at Deer Talk. Jeffrey lives and hunts in Rhode Island, new state for us to tackle here. He says, during the rut, does a warm up in weather affect deer behavior, and how? Good question. Does it affect deer behavior? Yes, it affects deer behavior. Does it affect when the rut occurs? No, it does not affect when the rut occurs. Deer, it's photo period. Deer are going to breed when deer are going to breed, and if your rut is typical like Rhode Island, I'm guessing your rut's in November, like most places in the Northeast and the Midwest and the North. Your rut's going to be in November. It's going to be early to mid to late November, depending upon several things. But is warm weather going to affect that? No. But this is how it's going to affect deer. It's going to affect when deer move. So deer could be, that breeding phase could be November 10th through 15th or 17th, that 7-day period. And you might not be seeing them during the day. What's happening is it's happening at night. How do you combat this? It's knowing your property. It's just like everything else, knowing the property you hunt and having other options to places to hunt, different areas, especially transition areas. Wooded ridges, things like that. If you keep hunting the same spots over and over and not seeing things, They call that the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over with not the same results. You have to do something differently, but it is a good question. It affects deer behavior, and it actually might affect where they go because they're looking for water, so water source might be a good place to hunt during the rut. And we found that especially in the last 5, 6, 7 years with ruts in warmer temperature climates. Okay, Brad, that was from Jeffrey. We're crossing his off. This one comes from Dylan Call. I hope I didn't butcher your last name there, Dylan. Dylan wants to know what's the best way to bow hunt in, this is a slam dunk. How did you get this question? What's the best way to bow hunt in mid-September in the Midwest? I think you wrote this.
Yeah, in the Midwest, two things. One is mornings are tough. Those deer bed so close to the edges, plus they're out in those fields. That, you know, if you go back into the woods, there's no deer back there. So if you try to sit on the edge, you're busting all the deer out. So we kind of vacate morning spots. I mean, on my whole farm, I own little over 300 acres. We have one slam dunk morning spot if we get a right wind, because we can sneak in the back door, not bust any of the deer out of the field. It's right on the edge. We can let those deer get past us. Even if they bet 100 yards from us, we can sneak out. Other than that, it's all in the afternoons. I like sitting over food sources. We do a ton of scouting, you know, either driving around, glassing deer. So I know kind of what deer that we're actually targeting. And once we know where he's coming out, we're going to run some trail cameras, put in the cutty backs, find out exactly what he's doing. You know, we don't push those deer too hard, but we're going to hang a set, and then we're going to try to kill them the first couple of weeks in September. In my opinion, if you have a mature deer on your place and you have pictures of them during the daylight, that is the best time to kill that.
Best time to get that deer. All right, Brad, you know, I was going to try, my intentions here were to get to 24 questions. We're going to try to do 24 questions in 20 minutes. We're not going to get to 24 questions. But next week, we're going to try to do that. We're going to take 3 more questions. And let's see, I guess I'm taking 2 of them, but I'm going to take the first one, you get the next one, and I'll take the last one. Next question comes from Paul Sapiro. Again, these are kind of hard names for me to pronounce. I hope I'm getting them right. Paul, thank you. This came off of Facebook. Paul wants to know, do you agree with the theory that an overpopulation of does, unbred does, will continue to come into estrus later in winter, causing bucks to hold their antlers longer, resulting in less time to grow antlers the following year and turning into smaller antlers? That's a loaded question. Do I agree with that? No, I do not. It's actually been proven not true. Overpopulation of does, overpopulation of deer generally, because you will not see, contrary to popular belief, you will not see herds with 8, 9, 10 does per buck. It's just not, it's physically impossible, it's biologically impossible. What you normally get, you see that on your property, you see a lot of does, but the other properties will balance things out. Long way of short saying that you have a high deer density, and this will affect what you see during the rut, so to speak, what you see during, you know, those magical months of late of October, November, December, even into January in the south some places. You're going to see a different type of rut. You're going to need to see a different type of activity. So those deer are not necessarily going into rut, into estrus later. When you see those late estrus deer, normally are the doe fawns. That's just, they're biologically built that way. They're just finally getting enough body weight to where they can breed, and then they go into estrus. But those older mature does will come into estrus. It's photo period. They're going to breed when they breed, and then normally every year it's about the same time, give or take, you know, 10 days. It's going to be in that, because they have to be born pretty much in the same place every year, same time frame. As far as antlers, smaller antlers, a couple things. Genetics, yes, obviously. Nutrition, obviously. What people don't notice a lot is density stress. Density stress, especially from these high deer density areas. And when I mean that, by that, areas with 50, 60, 70 deer per square mile or more. There's a lot of places in the country still like that. When you have a high deer density, this stresses out the herd, and it will manifest itself in many ways, and antler growth can be one of them. That I could go on and on and on, and I bore the crap out of everybody here just talking about it like that. But in a nutshell, that's pretty much how it works. All right, Paul, thank you very much. Brad, you're up next. And another one I think Brad wrote. This came from Thomas Ford, Facebook. Brad, how many acres of food plots do I need to sustain a large, healthy deer population on my property?
You know, it's kind of a loaded question because, you know, a large healthy population is different in everybody's opinion. But here's what I can tell you: if you have food left over in the spring, you probably have too much. You know, we started planting food plots on my place, you know, almost 20 years ago. And literally, if it's a bad winter, I can't get enough in there. I mean, we're going to have 15 acres in this year. And last year, we probably had almost 12 acres. And by the middle of January, they had eaten everything out of it. But it was extremely cold last year. We got snow depth was bad. And unfortunately for the whitetails, they don't know to reserve food. You know, they're just going in there. It's kind of like a kid in a bag of chips. You know, you give my 12-year-old a bag of chips, and he's going to eat the whole bag. Well, that's kind of like the whitetails. They're going to eat until they're full, and not really worry about the food being there tomorrow. So they're going to use up what they can. The other thing about whitetails, depending on the region of the country that you're in, if you have the prime food source, you're going to have deer from miles around. And a perfect example is one of my food plots. We planted a 5-acre food plot of turnips. This year it's in soybeans. And last year, when we were hunting it in December, we had 120 deer in that food plot. Those are not all my deer. So everybody, you know, when you're doing your management and you're harvesting some of those does, and people are like, how can you shoot 4 or 5? It doesn't really matter. I'm probably lucky if I shot one of my own deer that are living on my place, you know, because they're coming so far. So it's really a tough question, but all I can tell you is if you have food left over in the spring, you planted too much, you can back that down and try to find that sweet spot until they're utilizing all the food.
Absolutely, good tips, and he's the guy to ask. Brad knows this stuff. He's been doing it for a long time, knows it backwards and forward. Last question. Who's going to get the last question here? It's going to be Gary Austin. And Gary, thank you, and I want to thank everybody, but keep bringing your questions because we're going to save all these and we're going to dip back into it every week like this. Gary Austin asks, Dan, a lot of hunters go to their stands before dawn, hunt till 11 a.m. and come back out. Then they don't go back to their stand until 2 or 3 p.m. If deer have patterned a hunter, isn't a hunter missing a valuable hunting time? Yes, the hunter is missing a valuable hunting time. And Gary, your question probably, I'm guessing, is more related toward gun hunting, which we grew up with. We've seen this. A lot of guys actually bail out of their stands before 11 a.m. They bail at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or sometime in between. The best advice that I could give you on this came from John Eberhardt, and John has been a longtime deer and deer hunting contributor, incredibly good bow hunter from Michigan, hunts a lot of public ground, hunts a lot of small private parcels. He doesn't have a lease. He's very proud to have said he's never paid to have a lease or anything like that. He's always been trying to do it the hard way. And John told me, and this is a hard one to get your head around, but when I started doing it, I started seeing a lot more success. John said, get to your stand 90 minutes before first light and hunt as long as you possibly can hunt. If you have to get out of that stand, try to get out earlier and come back earlier. And people stop me and say, well, wait a second, 90 minutes before first light, why in the world would you be sitting there for an hour and a half before you could even hunt legally? Here's why, John told me, and it makes complete and total sense. John says, if you go into your stand, like most people do, 20 minutes, 30 minutes before first light, he said, as you're going through that woods, you might bump a buck that's in there, that's coming through that area, and you'll never know you bumped him. And this happens to you. You know, you might have jumped a deer and you heard a deer run off, or you just went up there and you didn't see anything, and normally it's a really good spot. And John said, if you get there earlier, you get in that stand, yeah, that buck might come through before first light, and you might not see him, but he's probably going somewhere, and if he's coming back to his bedding area later in the morning, an hour later or whatever, you're going to have a chance. And he said, you're not going to have that chance if you bump him going in there early. And I said, that makes total sense. Once I started doing that, I started killing more deer. And also the other thing, too, is like Gary mentions here, those midday hours. Yeah, it's not like you flip on a light switch and you see all this deer activity at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. But how many guys, especially I know you know, Brad, growing up, there was always a guy that killed his deer in the middle of the day, but he was in a stand in the middle of the day. And it's hard to do that. Those 11, 12-hour sits are just painful, but a lot of times all it takes is just changing up your routine a little bit. And you know, if you're doing the same thing over, and if you've done this all the time, like Gary says, getting in there, hunting for a little while, and then coming out, maybe you don't go in at first light, maybe before first light, maybe you get in there at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and you hunt all the way through the rest of the day, or you hunt all the way through 4 or 5 o'clock, or whatever it is. But you kind of got to try to throw things up a little bit so the deer have to keep guessing, so to speak, so they don't have you patterned. So I think that's some good advice there for you, Gary. Again, thanks everybody. We hope you enjoyed today's format more, because we got to more questions and we kept it going, and hopefully we answered your question. If we did not answer your question and you have a question, again, email it to me, send it to us on Facebook, especially. Very easy. Just go right there. We have a post every week. Deer Talk's coming up. What are your questions? Ask your question right there, and we will try to get to it at some point this year during the show. For Brad Rux, I'm Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Deer Talk Now.